Welcome to Life Plan Differently with Rick Dwyer from Argallus Financial Group. In this podcast, we'll help you connect your personal expectations to your financial realities. Join us for this journey where we take a holistic approach to financial planning as Rick Dwyer draws from years of experience and guest experts to teach you how to avoid costly mistakes in your financial planning.
Welcome back to the Life Plan Differently podcast with Rick Dwyer of Argallus Financial Group. I'm Patrice Sikora. At Argallus, there is a well-defined 7-step client experience. Rick will review that for us and talk about preparing for the day when you leave behind a steady paycheck and you can say you are retired. Now, Rick, step 1 you label as discovery, but it's more than just a meeting. Tell us more.
During our discovery step, we're doing a couple different things. Number 1, we may have met this individual or couple through a seminar that we held. They may have been a referral. So during this first meeting, we want to make sure that we're both on the same page, that we're a good fit for each other, in other words. I think there would be nothing less comfortable than trying to develop your life plan with somebody that you're not either in sync with, or for whatever reason you have a personality conflict. Making sure that we interact well together and that our philosophies are aligned is also part of that discovery process. So we do a lot of questions and answers going both ways just to make sure we're a good fit for each other. Another part of that step is we want to get the documents that they have brought with them, their account statements and maybe their insurance documents, any documents that they have that would be incorporated within a financial plan. And we want to have the opportunity to scan those, make copies, give them back the originals so that we can have a complete picture of where they stand financially. And it gives us the ability then to dive into a level of detail, which we'll talk about in step 2. We also want to make sure that we define their goals. In other words, what is important to them in retirement? And that's going to change from one person and one couple to another. One couple, for example, may have a desire to do a lot of traveling, while another may want to have a second home. And for another, they just want to go out to their favorite restaurant once in a while. Whatever their goals are, we want to make sure we have those documented so that we have the ability as we get further into step 2 to make sure that we are addressing their needs, goals, and desires.
And what might that step 2 be? Evaluation?
Yes, evaluation is step 2. So we're going to take all of the information that we gathered during our discovery meeting, and we're going to try and align those as best we can with their goals. Sometimes we can accomplish all of the goals and sometimes we can't. One of the other steps, I want to go back to step number 1, which is discovery, is after we have all the goals, we're going to also rank the importance of each of those goals. We may have, for example, 5 goals. Of those goals, we want to know which one is the most important, followed by the second most important, and so on. And the reason we want to do that is if we can't accomplish all of the goals, we want to know which ones are the most important and which ones we could either sacrifice or cut back on if we can't make all of the goals work.
Now, I noticed you have some numbers here, things to consider, the cost of retirement, for instance, assisted living facilities, for instance. You peg the cost of retirement, or your studies do, at $700,000?
Yeah, it can be a pretty staggering number.
Yeah.
And what a lot of people don't realize is that by not preparing for, say, a health event or a long-term care event that could include something from a stroke to breaking a hip, to dementia, which would include Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, things like that, you could wind up needing round-the-clock care because your spouse may not be able to fully attend to you if you're married. And if you're not married, then you need someone there to be able to attend to you. And care can be very expensive. My parents both required care in the latter parts of their lives, and it was $15,000 a month. You don't want to neglect care.
Wow.
Once again, that was for 2 people, 24-hour care. But it's not uncommon for care to run $23 an hour for in-home care. And that's where most people want to receive their care. So we want to plan for that. And in fact, when we're going through the discovery process, one of the things we'll ask them is, have you prepared for care? And if you needed to pay for it, how are you going to pay for it? And many times we'll get an answer like, well, I guess we'll take part of so-and-so's IRA, or maybe they have some CDs that are set to the side that they are planning on utilizing. But unfortunately, those numbers that they've set aside are very inadequate for what they think they're going to be recovering or requiring rather for long-term care. 200,000 sounds like a lot of money until you realize that you could be spending upwards of 100,000 a year. And then all of a sudden at the end of 2 years, you're out of money, but yet you still require care. And if you deplete all those assets for one person, especially if you're a couple, then what's left over for the surviving spouse?
Right.
So we want to make sure that we have healthcare, long-term care taken care of, but do it in a way that if you never need it, you're not paying for something that you never use. In other words, your estate will continue to keep that money, and you also continue to have access to those funds as well.
Well, it sounds to me that you also have to look into how long these clients may live based on what their parents lived.
Some really interesting studies in longevity is that just because your parents may have lived short lives, because we have clients that come in and say, well, my parents both passed away around 75. So, we're only thinking we need this money to last 10 years. And then you find out they run marathons, they don't smoke, they don't hardly drink. And you're looking at them and they're the epitome of health. And I'm saying, okay, you're 68. I think you have a lot more than 8 years to go. So you need to have that conversation with them. But just because their parents passed away at 75 doesn't mean that they will. And just because their parents may have lived into their late 90s doesn't mean you will either. So we want to come up with a number that makes sense. And for us in planning, we usually plan to between age 95 and 100. It's a little bit of give and take. If it was up to us every single time, we would always plan to 100. It's interesting, when I first got into the insurance business way back in the early 80s, the life expectancy tables went up on the policies to between 95 and 100. And now they go from 120 to 130, depending upon the carrier. So
Really?
the insurance companies know something's going on with longevity. I think the rest of us need to step up, wake up, and realize that we're living healthier for the most part, and we are living longer.
So 100 is not out of the question.
No, in fact, what's interesting is if you're a healthy couple, age 65 today, there is a 90% chance that one of you will live to, I believe it's 95. There is a 5% chance that one of you will live to 100. In a relatively short period of time, we've seen the growth of the 100 plus group growing almost faster than all other demographics. So it's a burgeoning group and expected to continue to grow over the next number of decades. And that's attributable to not only healthy living, but advances in medicine and in medical technology itself.
I'm going to have to talk to my husband, figure out which of us is going to live that long. I don't know.
Believe me, if you knew who was going to live longer and for how long, it makes the planning process so much easier.
I'm sure, which is a good question. Tell me the difference between planning for a woman and planning for a man.
That is an excellent question. And what makes it so interesting is that, we'll have couples that come in. I'm just going to talk about couples first,
Sure.
Because when it comes to singles, you effectively do the planning almost the same. But when it comes to couples, statistically speaking, women will live longer than men, usually somewhere in the 2 to 5 year range. So usually what winds up happening is, once again, I'm going to be very broad and say that a lot of couples, the male is in charge of the planning. And I realize that's changing. That's not always the case. But the reason that the wife or the spouse needs to be involved is because they may be the ones that are left with the plan that the husband developed. And a lot of times the husband's developing this plan and he's assuming that they're both going to pass away at the exact same time. And, in that case, the plans normally will work. But unfortunately, that's not the way real life happens. It's not uncommon for the spouse, wife in the case that we're talking about, to last for years and sometimes decades longer than the husband. When I was looking at assisted living facilities for my parents before they passed away, when we would go into these facilities, the vast majority of the inhabitants were women. So it just really drives home the point that women need to not only be involved in planning for their retirement, but they need to have an active role in it, because whatever winds up happening with the husband could dramatically impact how they're going to be surviving in retirement after the husband passes away. In my parents' case, I'll just do a little side story on them.
Mm-hmm.
They both passed away within 13 days of each other in 2018.
Oh, my.
And I believe that one of the main reasons that my mom gave up was not only because my stepdad passed away first, they've been together for almost 30 years, loved each other deeply. And so she lost her best friend and spouse. But on top of that, he had developed Parkinson's about 10 years earlier. And during the time that he had Parkinson's, they went through almost all of their money and went from being virtually debt-free to virtually penniless. So I think the combination of losing her best friend and not having the assets that they were used to, I think all impacted her willingness to live on. And she reached a point where she was done. I think people want to have the choice of what they're going to do at end of life. And you don't want to be in a position where you're making decisions because you just don't have enough money.
Well, this kind of brings us to step 3, vision. Tell me about that.
During step 3, the vision step, we're going to take all the information that we glean from step number 1, the discovery meeting, which includes all the assets, income sources, as well as goals, dreams, desires. We take that into step 2, where we do our evaluation, and we're trying to meet as many of those goals as we possibly can. And then during step 3, we have another meeting. And it's during that meeting that we present what we've come up with to maximize the number of goals that we can make attainable for that particular client and or client couple. What we're trying to do is show them we can meet either these goals or all your goals, preferably, is what we're trying to do. And we're coming up with different alternative suggestions that they get to pick and choose from. And it's really a conversation there where we're trying to find out, are we hitting the goals that are the most important, as you said, or have your goals changed? In other words, have the importance of your goals changed now that you actually see the plan and you want to do some slight adjustments? And that's what the purpose of the vision statement is, to kind of calibrate, are we on the same page that we discussed in step 1 after the initial analysis, or do we have to make some further changes? And we just want to be able to document where we are and are we going in the right direction? And sometimes we've hit the nail right on the head. They're happy with where we're going. And then we go on to step 4. If not, then we go back to step 2 again, reevaluate, and have another vision meeting after we've implemented those changes that we had discussed during the initial vision meeting.
Step 4, integrate. Tell me about that.
Once we reach the point where the clients are happy with the vision, then we start to integrate their existing assets and accounts into the overall plan. And the plan is what's been developed during the vision step. That could include moving assets from one account to another. It could include just incorporating existing accounts that they have somewhere else into the plan, in which case we don't have to do anything. And it may include putting some new products or services into effect that they currently don't have. So whatever it takes to make that plan effective and get it implemented is what we're going to do during the integrate step.
And during this step, do you educate your clients as well as to what you're doing?
We do that before we get to integrate. We do that during the vision step. Before we ever get to integrate, we want the clients to know exactly what the vision entails. If it means moving money from one account to another or adding a new product or service, we want them to know about that during the vision step. And this way, there are no surprises during the integrate step.
Moving on to step 5, it looks like there may be some time between step 4 and step 5, which is labeled realize. What do you mean here?
If there's anything during the integrate step that we haven't been able to fully accomplish, right away, because some assets take more time to move than others, then we're going to do that during the realize step. The realize step is where we have everything that we wanted to do during the integration step fully completed. And now we're actually realizing the benefits of the plan. So by the time we hit realize, everything's been moved that needs to be moved, everything that needs to be added for an account for the client or clients has been added. And now we're actually in the plan. The plan is now fully functional and is moving forward.
And moving forward, you've got step 6, which is observe. But this takes a year for you to really look at and then look back, review, probably plan ahead. Is that correct?
It is correct, but we do have certain vehicles that we use, such as our managed money platforms that we're managing and monitoring on a daily basis. So we'll be adjusting those throughout the year. Some of those get adjusted on a monthly or even an intra-monthly basis, while others get done on a quarterly basis. So we'll be adjusting portfolios as needed. But quite a few things don't need to be adjusted, and we'll just do a review on those. So whenever we have our reviews, which can range from quarterly to semi-annually to annually, is when we'll go back and we'll go ahead and have our review, which is actually the next step. But in the observe step, we're watching over the account, making sure it's performing as expected. And the clients, of course, are getting their statements, and then we update them on that during our quarterly, semi-annual, or annual meetings.
With the recent market volatility, I'm sure this observe has kept you pretty busy.
It has, but in all fairness, one of the things that we like is that we set our plans up so that our clients aren't beholden to the stock market. So what we find really satisfying is when we have a drop like we did in March, or we had the year before in December of 2018, we had no phone calls from clients worried about their accounts, because we set it up in such a way that they're not worried about what the market's doing, because we've already hit a risk level that they're comfortable with. They already know that if the market dropped, let's just say 35% as it did recently, well, they may only be down 10%. And that's a number that they can live with. They may not like it. No one likes their value of their account or portfolios going down, but it's within a range that they're comfortable with.
There's a comment in here, you can be hurt more by market losses than you win with gains. Talk to me about that.
So that's an interesting concept, in that when you're losing money, especially in retirement, those losses will hurt you more than gains will help you. What we mean by that, let's just use an example. So if you had 100,000 in your retirement account, and then the market lost 35%, well, you're now down to $65,000. Well, from 65,000 to get back up to 100,000 is about 52%. So you have to make 52% just to get back to where you were. So if you had never lost the money before, when the market dropped, or you only lost 10%, as I was saying previously, then when the market goes up 52%, you start making money instead of having to make up all those losses just to get back to even.
All right, we're going through a 7-step program. We've been through 6 of those steps. Tell me about number 7, Rick.
During the analyze phase, we're sitting down with the client and we're going over the results of the plan that we developed through the evaluation and the vision steps that we took earlier in the process. And now that the plan has been integrated, it is being realized, we're observing it, we want to go over those results with the client. And we want to see, are we on track? Are we ahead of where we thought we would be, or are we slightly behind from where we thought we would be? We want to just make sure that the client's questions are answered, that they understand where we are in relationship to what we designed. And we also want to make sure that there haven't been any life changes on their end that would require us to go ahead and make additional changes to the plan. If that's the case, for example, there could be a birth of a grandchild that they want to incorporate in the plan that wasn't there before. There's all sorts of things that happen for life events. There's deaths, there's marriages, there's children being born. So whatever those life changes are, if they need to be incorporated in the plan, well, then we're going to go back to step 1 and start that process again to incorporate those new life changes back into their plan.
So while you've got this nice 7-step program together, it appears there is no cookie-cutter approach to anyone.
That is correct. We call this the Argallus Financial Map, and we do it for every single client. We don't have a one-size-fits-all for any client. Being independent advisors, we're not beholden to any one company or product or service. So it gives us the flexibility to go out and find what's best for that particular client and work with them to achieve their goals.
Rick, you're talking about new clients that have been coming in here, but what if someone already has a plan and they maybe want a second opinion? Will you do that?
Absolutely. One of the things that we mention to people is by having a second set of eyes, look at that, we have the ability to let you know, is your plan complete or incomplete? And a lot of times they think they have a complete plan, but then we start asking them questions. What steps have you taken to minimize taxes? And we'll get sometimes different answers, but in most cases, they haven't done anything to really mitigate the effects of taxes. So that's a conversation we want to have. Here's a perfect example of why you want to do that. A client who is married, as an example, if their spouse passes away during that year, they will be able to file married filing joint. The following year, they're going to have to file as single. And just going from a married filing joint status to a single status will almost double their tax rate. So if they haven't accounted for that increase in taxes, then to maintain the same lifestyle, they're going to have to generate much more income and pay a much higher rate of taxes. So that's one thing that we want to address. The second thing we want to make sure we address has the long-term care portion that we were discussing earlier, how is that being addressed, and is it being addressed efficiently? So these are the things that we want to look at. A lot of people look at, for example, what's my rate of return? Well, rate of return is kind of meaningless, especially when we go back to what we were talking about earlier, that losses will hurt you more than gains will help you. It's not what you make that counts, it's what you keep that counts. And if you can keep it in a very tax efficient basis, as well as have your dollars do more than $1 worth of work. In other words, if you could have your money generating your income, but also providing you for care in case you ever needed it for long-term care or dementia, and then do it in a tax efficient manner, wow, you really have a complete plan that's taken a lot of different things into account.
Lots of great thought-provoking information there, Rick. Thank you so much. Rick Dwyer of Argallus Financial Group. To subscribe to upcoming episodes of Life Planned Differently, just use the subscribe button on this page. You can also share with friends and colleagues using the share button. I'm Patrice Sikora, and let's talk again later.
Thank you for listening to the Life Planned Differently podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Argallus Financial Group Inc. or Capital Management Services Inc. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service providers with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.